Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. Today for Comictober I'm going to talk about the Frank book by Jim Woodring. Let me read you what it says about it here. Readers who haven't discovered Jim Woodring's Frank stories will find a treat waiting for them in the pages of this book. Since publication in 1991 of the award-winning, epoch-making Frank in the River, these lusciously hypnotic fables have dazzled cartoon lovers the world over. Frank is a generic anthropomorph who lives in a world of mysterious and dangerous beauty, propelled by forces beyond his control, including his own unquenchable curiosity. He finds himself in one bizarre escapade after another, frequently involving the loathsome man-hog or the power-hungry whim. Luckily, Frank has a protector and ally in the form of his feisty godling companion, Pupshaw. Frank's adventures are told in a series of nearly wordless cartoon stories that draw readers deep into a hallucinatory mind escape governed by the profound interior logic that raises the Frank book to a level above fantasy. As Francis Ford Coppola says in his introduction, the ancient myths and folk tales of all cultures which have been preserved for so many centuries have meaning for us today because the fantastic elements in them are rooted in immutable reality. The Frank stories belong to this class of literature. Now, this is a little bit different comic, and it's nearly wordless. Uh, there's no word balloons of any kind. There's occasionally a sign or one story uh, has text at the bottom of each page of the story, and it's kind of funny because the the text at the bottom just tells you exactly what's happening in the pictures above it, and you could tell exactly what's going on in the pictures without those words there. And I think that's the point he was making with that. It was a short little story, but I think that's the point he was making, is that the words are sometimes just frivolous. You don't need them to tell what you're telling in a comic book. And Jim Woodring does a fantastic job of taking a pretty thick book. How many? It's got like 330 pages, and um, to carry that without having word balloons or anything like that is a real testament to his talent. You can see Frank there on the cover there holding the flags in the strange, it looks like a top on its side, or some kind of vase. That the little creature at the bottom there is Pupshaw. It's kind of like his pet. They get into misadventures together. Uh, there's lots of stuff like this thing that he's in here with that looks like a top, and all sorts of like pottery or strange shapes take place throughout the whole story. There's all sorts of strange things going on, and it looks like I'm peeking around this book. I am, because it's so big. Um, it just has all these strange and weird shapes, and it reminds me a little bit of H.P. Lovecraft. I'm wondering if that may have been one of the inspirations for some of the stuff he does in this, because it has that, what they called non-Euclidean geometry that takes place in this book. There's a lot of strange shapes, and uh, there's lots of creatures with tentacles and multiple eyes. It really reminds me of Lovecraft, and I think there's a good possibility that that may have been an influence. If not, then he did an amazing job of adding it without knowing uh, Lovecraft. Uh, the stories are told, most of them are fairly short. Some are in color, some are in black and white, but you don't even really notice as you go through because it flows so seamlessly through the book. Uh, it just really is excellent. I'll show you a few of pages of it. This one's one of my favorite pages because it has uh, the chicken there smoking a cigarette just for no reason, smashing his eggs. It's just a weird little thing. You can see Man Hog on the other page there being chased by a creature. This is one of the collar ones. Let's see here. Here's some of Frank making these almost like mummified type versions of himself in a cave, taking a skull and adding to it one that Manhog is after. Here's one with Pup Shaw, and then the other's Push Paw, and they form shapes that go together in different ways, and they kind of become friends. It just is really. Let me see if I can find some of the beginning. But I mean, he makes good use of the 9-panel page, or 8 in the case of the other page there. He just really, it's just amazing art. I'm trying to find what something here. Like there, he puts a sign up that says "I quit." That's one of the few things that appears as a dialogue. But it's just anything can happen in this. And that's what's so fascinating, is that it really is fantastical in what he does without words. Uh, it's I'd say that I've been saying about ages. I think pretty much any age could enjoy this. Uh, it reminds me a lot of some of the Looney Tunes, like Roadrunner and Coyote, where they wouldn't have any dialogue in it. Uh, and those were wildly successful. I love those cartoons. And this has that same level of success with wordless uh, pictures. It just has a really neat vibe throughout the whole thing. It's funny. Uh, it's poignant at times. Uh, he really just does a fantastic job of making an accessible, uh, fantastical world that no matter what happens in it, you believe it. Uh, it's easy to follow. Like I said, there's lots of strange shapes and strange creatures, and they get involved in strange things, and there'll be multiple Franks, or multiple Jerry the chicken. Uh, they have some things that happen with him, and they're always fighting against that man hog that's like a half man, half hog. And Whim, who, if I can find a picture of him, he looks like he's like a devil-like creature. And he's all throughout this book, yet for some reason I can't find a picture with him in it. Okay, well, I give up. But he looks like kind of like a devil and is real skinny, and he causes all sorts of mischief in it. And the man hog is always causing trouble for Frank. It just is a really interesting series of tales that involve this anthropomorphic guy here that just really entertain. and I think he does an amazing job of it. And like I said, pretty much any age could read this. You probably appreciate it if you're a little older, just because kids would probably want words with it. Uh, but maybe not. I don't know. Like I said, it works for Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. So it works for this, really. And there's a interesting assortment of things in the back that include covers from original issues of some comics that Frank appeared in, and they have a series that shows a series of cards that were made that had the names of all the characters in it, because you don't ever necessarily know the names unless it's just stated in the title of the piece, which happens a couple times, but the others you don't know their names. It just doesn't come up because nobody talks. And it was a card series, and they reprint those in here, and they reprint the first ever Frank story, the first ever picture of Frank. But Jim Woodring is amazing and does a really great job with this, and I highly recommend it. He's got a this is a was the first main volume of Frank, that's a hardcover. It's still, if I checked, it's still available in softcover and on Kindle or Comixology, whichever you use. Which amounts to the same thing now because you do it through Kindle anyway. But it is available, so I made sure of that before I decided to talk about it. And he's got a new collection that just came out, and I put in an order for an autographed version of it, and I believe it even comes in a slipcase, but it's like a follow-up that has a lot of the stuff that follows up the Frank book. So he's got several other books out as well, and I highly recommend his work. I think it's great. So thank you for hanging out with me this week, and I will see you next week for more Comictober.